where the famous passage where Fanon refers to the utterly naked declivity, a zone of aridity and sterility, right? Okay. And in the back of my mind, really kind of more than in the back of my mind, what I'm thinking of as a kind of way of engaging what the truth, not of refuting, but actually engaging the deep truth in Fanon's formulation. And what I'm trying to say is that the depth of that truth is that it's not about, is that aridity and sterility, which he invokes in the name of a regenerative revolutionary movement, by very definition of that invocation, has to also be situated in relation to some sort of living water, right? And to some kind of generative capacity, okay? And what's interesting is that living water and generative capacity has to be understood immediately itself, precisely in relation to what it is that he talks about, namely sterility, aridity, aridity, so sterility and aridity. So it's this horrible dialectic. But there's a poet, M. Norbesi Philip, who precisely understands this horrible dialectic, right? And it's the dialectic which is in some sense kind of symbolized or manifest by what it means to be thirsty on the ocean, right? What it means to be deprived of water while surrounded by water, okay? And so that's who I'm thinking of. And it's the poem called Zong, which if you haven't tried to read it, you have to try to read it. And the main reason that you have to try to read it is when you try to read it, you realize that you can't read it by yourself. It's like church. So we have to continually work where aridity is only insofar as it is inseparable from hyperhydration, where thirst and submergence converge, in the hold on the open sea. Through this interplay of the establishment and the breakdown of the cell, if we are ever to attend the birth of an insurgency that Fanon prophesies and enacts. The splitting of the cell is inseparable from the splitting of the ego that could be said to impose narcissism while also constituting narcissism's closure. There is an hydroptic phono-optics of the general bomb, and it's the general bomb. And I'm thinking of this poem, this is like one of my favorite poems by John Donne called A Nocturnal Upon St. Lucy's Day. Have you ever read it? This great passage, and it reads something, the general bomb, the hydroptic earth hath sunk, right? He's totally interested in precisely this metaphor of dropsy, right? That kind of horrible, unquenchable thirst, right? That is actually exacerbated by the drinking of water, right? Okay. So here's the new part. It is as if Fanon is providing commentary on the unpublished notebook of his own return, precisely in order to tell slant, the experimental slant. This powerful sociolinguistic self-analysis is a kind of jumping off point, but what I want to do is slow down and linger for a little while over the question of the little Negro, pigeon, le petit nègre, which is a monument to the mind of the little Negro steel workers and dock workers and field workers and work shirkers and so on. The black man's relegation to pigeon, understood as prison, as imprisonment in passage, or as naked experimental incline, or both, begs the question of the relationship between blackness and the black man, the para-ontological distinction that is everywhere implicit in Fanon's text, precisely at or as the point in which self-analysis becomes possible. That space Jared Sexton talks about in which we discern the distinction between vantage and view. But neither Fanon nor Sexton nor Wilderson, even in texts that we are constrained to call autobiographical, and moreover nowhere in the cramped and capacious nowhere from which the vast anti- and anti-autobiographical field, from and within which black thought and black literature plots its escape and fantasizes its flight, can the brutally unauthorized author be said simply to be talking about himself? She's talking about the self, precisely in the service of a complete lysis of that morbid body and in its morbid universe. Fanon says that, quote, "We are aiming at nothing less than to liberate the black man from himself, which is to say, the self that he cannot have and cannot be, but against which he is posed as the occupant of no position." Is this liberation complete in Fanon? Can self-analysis, which is the name Cecil Taylor gives to improvisation, liberate us from the self, or does it only further secure our incarceration? Again, this is a question that emerges not only in relation to Fanon, but also in relation to Equiano and Prince, Douglass and Jacobs, Du Bois and Cooper, Wilderson and Hartman, permeating through and in an autobiographical trace that continues to animate the black radical tradition. On the other hand, the new black music is this: find the self, then kill it, as Norbesi Phillips' work instantiates. But to echo Ellison again and again, so few people really listen to this music. It is, moreover, seldom that even the ones who make this music listen to it. Hence the ongoing challenge, the ongoing construction of the intramural. And this has, I think, everything to do with another really important distinction that Professor Sexton makes between what it is to be a witness and what it is to be a spectator. And it's really important, and someday I hope I can figure out how to understand the relationship between the distinction between witness and spectator on the one hand, and the distinction between vantage and view on the other. It's like sometimes I think I get it, and then other times it seems so far away. I'm not sure that Fanon really listens, or that more generally he really senses the symposium he prepares for us. This preparation could be said to take the form of a sacrifice in which he takes on the unpleasant task of rigorously describing what's so hateful in the way anti-blackness mishears what it overhears. Faulty recordings can't help but trigger violent disavowal. The distance between "I don't sound like that" and "I'm not like that" is infinitesimal in its immeasurable vastness. Does black speech, does the little Negro, assume a culture or bear a civilization? If not, then how could it be speech? What does it mean to consider that black speech is the sound of natal alienation, the sound of being without a heritage, without a patrimony? It means, first of all, that all these terms must be revalued, precisely from the already exhausted perspective of the devalued, which is to say the invaluable. When Fanon speaks of local cultural originality, who or what is speaking? Who speaks the possession of a language, of a culture, of a civilization? Who speaks the necessity of a heritage such that its absence is understood as relative nothingness? Fanon moves by way of a model of the subject that is evacuated even as he writes. This is a James Sneed formulation in a sense, a Lewis Gordon formulation in another. Derrida speaks too, out of Algeria, of a problematic of accent, corresponding in its way to the Martinican swallowing of R's, of which Fanon speaks. The dispossessive force of black speech confirms, in one sense, and obliterates in another, the monolingualism of the other. My language is not mine, also because its undercommonness cuts me and mine. The trouble is that Fanon leaps from an analysis of the social situation